This conference will now be recorded.
What a loyal bunch of folks we have in our audience. I just want to make sure we're not messing with them.
Yeah, they have no stake in the matter.
No, none. They're just
Are you
interested
about ready,
citizens.
Mr. Burns?
Yes, sir, anytime. We're close.
Not any time, at 4:30.
4:30, exactly. Now that Mr. Kennedy's here.
It is.
Look at that.
What are you doing?
Look at that. Well, I just like to make an entrance.
Okay, Sheila.
It's not bad.
I'd like to know who runs her calendar.
I'll call the October 4th, 2023 meeting of the APC Executive Committee to order. Mr. Burns, would you call the roll, please?
Larry Leverins.
Here.
Jackson Boken.
Here.
Gary Schroeder.
Here.
Jerry Reynolds. Greg Jones.
Here.
Tom Murtaugh.
Present.
Kathy Parker.
Here.
Quorum present.
Approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the September 6, 2023 public hearing as submitted.
A second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. There is no new business. There is no public hearing. Approval of the October APC public hearing agenda.
I move that the following subdivision be placed on the October 18, 2023 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda at petitioner's request, placement thereon being without reference to compliance or noncompliance with the adopted subdivision ordinance. That'd be S 5153 Commerce Place subdivision, Phase 2, Section 1A, replat of lots 3 and 4 minor sketch.
I second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.
I move the following rezone petitions be placed on the October 18, 2023 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda. Z 2900 Imagination Lofts LLC, John Crone and Greg Malakis, Urban Point Plan Development, CB and R2U to PDMX. Z 2906 Nicholas C. Rohr, R1 to AW and Z 2908 Harvey W. Biddle, R1 to A.
I second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I move the following petitions be placed on the October 25th, 2023 Area Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing agenda. BZA 2128, Jeremy Du Bois. BZA 2129, Cedric and Zandra DeHue. And BZA 2130, Nick and Melissa Hammond.
I second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I move the following subdivision special exception request that these cases will not adversely affect the comprehensive plan. BZA 2128, Jeremy Du Bois. BZA 2129, Cedric and Zandra DeHue. And BZA 2130, Nick and Melissa Hammond.
I second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. There are no petitions for determination of variances. Budget report.
I move we approve the September 2023 budget report as submitted.
I second.
Mr. Hiddle.
Thank you. Budget report is included in the back of the packet. Nothing unusual or interesting to call out, but would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any other business?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Good job, Larry.
That one tough.
Let's see if Gary can keep up the tradition. See if he can get through ordinance in 5 minutes.
4:35, I think we are ready to go, looks like. So I will call to order the Area Plan Commission, Tippecanoe County Ordinance and Bylaw Committee for October 4th, 2023. And it looks like we have a quorum. So first on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the September 6th, 2023. So if someone would make a motion, please. So I have a motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Looks like we're looking at proposed residential townhouse zones.
And I think that's on me. So as you recall, we it was passed, I think in August, wasn't it, for the proposed, or the residential townhouse zones. And that ordinance, if you recall, banned all front-load garages. And and obviously that particular zone is something that's been worked on for a long time, so we wanted to move that forward. But I think a conversation is warranted about allowing some front-load garages to be used. I handed out a sheet or a one-page illustration of some examples of townhomes with front-load garages that look fairly decent. And then actually I saw a couple more examples when I was in the Carmel and Fishers area over the weekend that really are very, very nice and market between $500,000 and $750,000. And those units are very popular and are selling very quickly from what I understand. Another concern about rear load garages, especially out in the county. I know the county is going to be really reluctant to accept alleyways. To maintain an alleyway is going to be, very expensive, and that's really going to be frowned upon. And to have an alleyway maintained by an HOA long term is troublesome. So, I think that we should start this conversation about allowing this, and I'm eager to get any input from the rest of the committee. Not all at once, but
I like it. I mean, I think you can have a variety, and it depends on the land that you have available, but this seems to certainly utilize space and create density while still giving people a two-car garage and a front entry. I can't see what the back look like, but are these photos from Indy or Carmel or just?
they were just off the internet, I think, but
Yeah. No, but I think.
These are not ones that I've seen personally.
Okay, no, but I like it.
Did you say that we had banned it before?
Well, in the current ordinance or the current zoning that was just passed, it states, I don't recall the exact wording, does it?
Yeah, that's a rear load requirement. I guess it was in the packet there. Access from the rear yard, it states that, a garage isn't required. They could have a carport, they could just have a surface parking space in the back, that was the intent. And all the provisions, and since these just a conventional zone, all of them would be subject to variance requests as well, so.
So I guess I was wondering what the purpose of that was.
The purpose of it is essentially to try to promote pedestrian activity better. When you have driveways mere feet from each other, that's, curb cut, curb cut, curb cut. So having a sidewalk it's difficult. It's a more harsh pedestrian environment because the auto environment is just so dominates.
Yes.
So that's sort of the underlying, idea behind it.
Thank you.
So, and I do have a staff comment
Okay.
when you're ready.
And a question, the West Lafayette project that was there by the airport, the housing
Providence?
project. Yeah, Providence. That contains alleyways, correct?
Yes.
And-
Not on all of it, but in portions of it.
And-
They have some front-loaded homes and rear-loaded homes, so, yeah.
And who is maintaining those alleyways? Is West Lafayette maintaining them?
They're public rights-of-way.
They are, okay.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
are
there are
they,
no private streets in Providence.
and are the alleyways the same width as the streets?
Oh, no, they're
And-
much smaller. They're like, I believe the city fire has like a minimum like 16 feet for access, to lay a truck up and put down its supports. So I think that's like the absolute minimum that they tolerated. There may be some that are a little wider. There's some fluctuation.
The alleys are 16 feet?
The alleys, yeah. Because they also had discussions with city trash service, and some of their vehicles are, depending on the turning movements, are even more restricted than a fire truck, even though they're smaller.
Yeah.
So,
And in the county, I can't think of any places other than Benjamin Crossing that have alleyways, and those are not.
Yeah, I mean,
maintained.
that was a planned development, so they designed it with that in mind, yeah. That might be the only example in the unincorporated county that comes to mind. Yeah. But can I offer a staff comment?
Sure,
or-
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we're not unsympathetic to that, and I've certainly seen, the front-loaded variety. We are proposing two districts, the RT and the RTU. What I was going to suggest is that let the RT, we could remove the rear-loaded requirement on the RT, the suburban style townhouse district, but leave it for the RTU where alleys are present or planned, so that in those urban core areas where there's infill sites and we have alleys, or perhaps they wanted to add some, like in Providence, more urban, that still be in place. And then if there's perhaps some specific sites that, hey, we just can't do it here, well, they could get a variance request for that and say, hey, we just need a variance on these couple of lots because, I don't know, there's a big hill there and we can't get behind it. So I was going to suggest that the RTU district, keep the rear-loaded, but then the RT, it could just be silent. So
Okay.
then the developer could decide if they want to do rear-loaded or not.
Okay. That
So I
seems,
offer that.
yeah, that seems fair.
Good. Any other comments from the commission? And then I'll probably ask for public comment if there is any.
Yeah, just one, like I like to say, clarifying. So if a variance, they just have to go through, what's the cost of a variance? No, you're good. No, what's the cost of a variance?
What's a what?
Cost of a variance for, is it $100? Is it
Is that? Yeah, it's 100, I think.
$100?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And so if an RTU property, if we do as recommended, RTU property would have $100 extra, basically, if they want to have a front-loaded garage in an RTU zone.
Right, for however many lots they want, because it's just for that one variance. They're from one item. They're requesting a variance.
So if
from
they're
that.
doing a development of 12, it would be $100 times 12.
No.
No,
Yeah.
it'd be $100.
For the.
Great.
Yeah, because it's by the type of variance.
Thank you very much.
What, it's not, just let me follow up on that. So if they had in this complex,
Uh-huh.
they had 5 buildings and each building had 5 units, okay? So each building, would there be $100 for the entire complex?
It's $100, well, it's $100 to apply with one variance. And then I think there's a lesser charge for multiple variances.
So
So-
it would be one variance For the complex?
Yeah,
or for
because
the
they're only
unit?
asking from a variance from one item, the rear-loaded, so they would just pay that one, you know,
Regardless of how
essentially
many
the legal description that the variance encapsulates.
Okay.
You know, no rear-loaded is, you know, they're exempt from it.
Okay.
If it's granted.
Okay.
So one fee.
Okay.
Yeah. If they, but say they wanted a variance for height, setbacks, well, those are added variances.
Right.
Yeah, so then the cost increases because you're asking for more variances. But if you're just asking a variance from one thing, and that one thing applies to a zillion buildings in your project, well, it's still just the one fee.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
for example.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anybody from the audience wish to address this, please?
Ryan Kennedy, 612 Northridge. As far as the suburban zone, I started talking with Ryan about that a couple years ago, and the whole idea behind all of that was to offer a product where we could keep our costs down. And if we have to do the rear loaded, we're essentially having to pave 2 streets for each unit, right? And then in the RTU zone, I would just ask for the flexibility, the denser that we go, like in our urban cores, which I think is something that we're trying to accomplish, right? Like dense urban cores.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the urban zone would only apply to those urban sewer district maps in the back of the zoning ordinance, that fairly, where there's existing, where usually it's the older street grid parts of the city. So it's a fairly constricted area where these zones could apply.
So, and this, what I'm talking about here would all depend on the size of the lots, the depth and the width and all of that. But I would ask for the flexibility that if we wanted to do, like townhome here and then green space and townhome, we really couldn't do that with the rear-loaded product. Because I do think that green space, like I said, as we go denser, like towards our urban cores, as developers and builders, and we got to sell our product. That green space could be used as an advertising or an amenity, to the buyers. So, just would like some flexibility on the RTU zoning. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Schreckengast, 635 South Earl Avenue, Citation Homes. That's in Lafayette. Is it possible to get a variance before you get the zoning?
No.
So what if you get it zoned to the rear load garage and then you don't get your variance? Do you commit that you'll always give a positive staff recommendation for a variance?
Could you repeat that last question?
Would you commit if we did it your way? And we want to do a front load garage? First, you rezone it with the rear load garage, and then you want to come in and get a variance to allow you to shift it and put a front load garage. Would you commit that you'll always give a positive staff recommendation for that?
It depends on how it passes the tests for a variance. That's how staff makes their determination.
Okay. I personally think that's kind of a cumbersome way to do it. I think a better way to do it is let this rear load garage zoning classification go into place, but then have a separate zoning classification for what I think is more likely to happen with a front load garage. And we can use examples, Skyline Ridge and Sawmill Run. There were duplexes, there were 3 units and 2 units. They all had front load garages. That was done as a PD so we could sell fee simple those units. Hillside Villas and Sawmill Run, the same thing. You see it much more prevalent in that certain price point. Now, $600,000 price point's a pretty high price point, but if you wanted to be in the $300,000, I'd go down the road of let this townhouse, rear load garage, rear alley, create a zoning classification for that, but also create a new one.
That's what the RTU is. It is that class. That's what I'm suggesting, is
Okay.
that in areas where there are existing alleys, so no one's building anything, the alley's there, or one is planned, perhaps the city wants to plan alleys. I want to give them that option. That if you're locating that R2U zone there, your rear load, and if you can't, you can request a variance from it. But, so that's just for existing. So the places you mentioned didn't have existing, like Sawmill Run was,
Right.
that was a greenfield site that, well, wooded, but, it was undeveloped. And then they developed it with PD. Same thing with Catherwood.
So what will the
others.
zoning
But like
class-
5th Street and Centennial.
Right.
On
That's a-
alleys.
that's a
So
total
it's
different-
those sorts of situations I'm trying to zero in on.
Okay,
Where the infrastructure's already in place.
Okay, well, we're in agreement. So we will have a separate zoning classification for front load,
That
fee
is,
simple?
that is the RT zone.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
anything outside the U district, which is most of the county, would have the front load.
Do we have a draft of that now? Or does it have to be prepared?
Of this proposed change?
Yes.
We'd have to be prepared.
Okay, it'll be a separate zoning.
Yeah, I wanted to be
Okay.
clear on these fine
Well,
points
I'd look
before
forward to
drafting
seeing
anything.
that and let the development community take a look
Sure.
at it, see if it's, if it will work, but
Yeah,
that's
we
a
can do
better
that.
sense to go. I just, the idea of zoning something and hoping that you'll get a variance, seems cumbersome to me.
Okay, thank you,
I think we're
Steve.
all in agreement.
Yeah.
Tom?
Just a clarification on what you said previously about the urban area. So I just want to make sure I'm not confusing it with the urban zone that goes outside of the city limits. You're talking about this zone.
Oh, wait, yeah, here we go. Here's an example. We have Lafayette's urban sewered area.
Okay, so this was like what we talked about when we talked about self-storage.
Precisely.
Okay, okay.
We're using the same, all U districts are bounded by urban sewered maps in the appendix of the UZO.
Okay.
So this is Lafayette's, and then West Lafayette has a little one. I think Battleground has a little one. There's a few.
Okay, so there is a significant portion of the city
It's most of the city.
that is not covered in this,
outside.
that's outside of this area.
So the rear loaded requirement on the RTU, because you can only get U district zones in
In
these
those,
areas.
okay.
Like the R1U or the
Does West
R2U.
Lafayette have any?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, they have some, when we did the New Chauncey neighborhood rezone, we introduced U districts.
Okay.
Because New Chauncey was already in the urban sewer map for West Lafayette.
and even the towns do as well?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
The incorporated towns.
Yes.
And Stockwell, actually, some unincorporated
Yes.
areas do too, that have historic urban cores.
Okay, okay.
That answer your question?
Yes, that did, okay. I was confused with that. What is that boundary called that's outside of the city limits?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is connected with transportation planning.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and federal highway classifications.
So, just to clarify, the RTU would only be in those, could
Yes.
only be in
Yes.
those areas?
Only a property owner within these boundaries could even apply for a U district.
Okay,
Any U district, could be R1U, R2U, R3U, RTU, so.
Okay.
Yes.
So just to clarify again, it's their choice if they're in that district to apply for the RTU,
If they're
in that zone.
yeah, that would be the zone that they go for if they want to do townhouses.
But if they didn't want the U, or I'm saying,
Request the variance.
to request the variance,
Right, yeah, if they had some lots, either all of them or some of them, that they wanted to get a variance from, for whatever reason, they could apply for variance from the rear loaded.
it makes me nervous, because when we went down this path with the storage units, there was things that occurred that have occurred after the fact that we didn't think were going to occur, so this whole thing makes me nervous.
so I think what you're asking is, can somebody in that district ask for an RT zoning instead of an RTU zoning?
No, and that's true anywhere.
That is.
And any U district only belongs in an urban sewered mapped area.
And they have to go with?
That's been policy since '98, right? Kathy? Yeah. Yes, you can. Yeah. Right. Yeah, Kathy's correct. So, yes, someone could apply for an RT zone in a U district area if they really wanted to. Correct.
Does that make you feel more comfortable?
So I guess I don't.
Because
Why the
under that scenario, they wouldn't
delineation?
even need to
If you
apply
can
for a
have the
variance if
RT
rear loaded is the only thing they care about.
Huh?
I'm sorry. Say someone pursued an RT zone right in downtown Lafayette, like nearby, inside this mapped
Zone.
area. They could apply for that district, if they wanted to, and
But
city
it'd be
council could
probably
approve it.
recommended not favorable by the commission. By the-
Yeah, that'd be our recommendation, because, that's what the U districts are for. But city council could approve it, and there it is. I mean, as Kathy said, there's R1 zoning in this area, in these areas, where we would normally recommend R1U, since it's in that core area, so. And then if they did that, then what I ended with before was that if they wanted, if the rear-loaded thing was their issue, well, if they rezone it to RT, then it wouldn't apply. They wouldn't even need to go for a variance in that instance. So we're just trying to promote an urban standard in the urban core, essentially. That's the objective.
Isn't also true in RU districts that sometimes your setbacks are smaller, or they're average, so there's benefits to doing the R1U.
Right. We figure that real estate's at a premium, so
Yeah.
there's
There's benefits.
Correct.
So, okay.
And like I said, there's a relief valve for special situations because of geography or some such thing. That's the variance process. So, there's actually some old townhomes that, down, I think, 2nd Street on the east side of the tracks, or the west side of the tracks, an old PD from a long time ago that's kind of built into a hill. There's a couple of townhouses, a handful of townhomes, and they're all front-loaded because it's built into a hill. They couldn't do anything in the back, and it's kind of in the traditional street grid area,
I think that's a good point, Gary, and I didn't realize that before. So there are some advantages that developers may want in the RTU, for being RTU versus RT.
Right, they can kind of add more density, I guess. That's a better way of putting it, because, you can have smaller lots. You could technically add more units if that's your objective.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the similar rationale behind the other U zones. R1 and R1U are different that way. So we kind of modeled these districts after those existing ones.
Plus, if it's in the heart of the city, where alleys are already in place,
Right.
the city is going to want
Yeah,
the
and I wanted to
driveways in
reiterate,
back.
that's what I was suggesting as a stipulation to this, is that, in areas where there are existing alleys or planned alleys, and if they're planned, the city would have to have some sort of document saying we have alleys planned for this area, then that's where this would apply. So,
They probably would.
there are areas, even within here, that have no alleys. So that rear-loaded requirement wouldn't be there. There are no alleys, so either planned or physically there. So it's a fairly limited thing. Essentially, the objective would be to make use of the existing city infrastructure that's there. If they already have public alleys, let's use them. It minimizes curb cuts.
Okay, so you're suggesting that a revision be made to the RTU that states that it would, the rear-loaded garages would only be required where alleyways are planned
Are planned or are
existence.
present.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what so I could prepare that and then bring it back for scrutiny for everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
So to recap, it sounds like RT will be able to do front-loading, and they would be able to apply for that zoning category in an RTU in urbanized area, if so desired, or they could also go RTU if that fit their model. Sounds to me that might work.
I think so.
Okay. Any other comments on this before we move on? Okay, very good.
So I'll plan on having something for November.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. Correction to the previously committed approved UZO amendment number 11. Changing manufactured home. Looks like Kathy.
Yeah, so last month, Mike Wolf was here, and we discussed the fact that our ordinance has misnamed manufactured homes. It should be a modular home instead of manufactured. We discussed it. It was passed last month. Then after that meeting, David realized there were a couple of other places in the ordinance that also talked about manufactured homes. So this amendment has now been updated to fix the couple of places in the ordinance that talks about manufactured homes when it should say modular homes, basically. And it can be kind of confusing. Do you have any questions about that, or?
So we have manufactured home, we have modular home, and we have mobile home. Are
Yeah,
any of
so-
those going away completely?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Because mobile home park and manufactured home community are like joined together in the ordinance, and that's not changing, that's fine. But a modular is a step above a manufactured home. So Mike Wolf tells me.
Okay.
So we need to approve this and send it on to the...
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Actually, the second part of this is the agricultural rental halls. That has not changed. That's the same as what you approved last month.
Okay. Any other questions on those? Any public comment on those two issues?
Shane Weiss, 6940 State Road 26 East Lafayette. When that is drafted for the new zoning, could we have a copy of that sent to Bagel just to review it before the next meeting? And also, could we get a copy of the mapping for the U district so we can review that,
You
please?
can, but I think it's in the ordinance, which should be available.
Yeah, the
online.
amendment is on the table.
It's on the table.
What I'm talking about, yeah.
He's talking about townhouse.
You're talking about
Yeah,
townhouse?
for the townhouse, amendment, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, if we
sorry.
could just get a copy of that to review. And
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are they on the mailing list for the Thursday when that comes out, the packet comes out Thursday? Is there a big list that goes to or not? Don't know. Christina? Ask Jen. Maybe call the office and see if you can get on that list. Okay. Any other comments from the staff, from the commission?
Do we need a motion to move this one forward?
Please.
Motion to move correction to the previously committee-approved UZO Amendment Number 111.
Second.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We're down to citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments? I have one that we kind of talked about before, and I haven't talked to anybody, but the park reservation land language that's in the ordinance, we kind of talked about that, and I think the city of Lafayette, are they doing a land parks plan? Yeah, I thought somebody was in the process of doing West Lafayette did one. I don't know if there was another jurisdiction that was going to
We've
do
not
it.
heard anything from Lafayette.
Okay.
County
Okay.
Parks wants to talk to us about
Maybe
updating
that
their
was it.
master plan, and we're going to meet with their board in November, but I don't know that they have any designs on that type of approach, but we'll find out.
Okay. It just is unclear to me, and that I guess I never got a clear answer where that authority comes from, that the jurisdiction can reserve land for their use. I think what we got was, we saw in an ordinance in Ohio, and I know from what I looked up, there was some stuff in ordinance back in the 80s and even the late 90s, but all that had been repealed. So I think it makes sense when it was put in there, they probably had statutory authority to reserve land. But I guess I'd like a clarification so that if they do reserve land, we don't end up defending something that we don't really have any authority to defend. If we
Gary,
did-
are you talking about the 5-year window hold on
Yes.
property? Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Sounds like a legal interpretation to me.
Absolutely, and I think the answer is that when we were all doing this back in the 80s, that this issue never came up. And the reason that it was
rationally based on the state statute is a policy decision. And what I mean by that is that the state statute is known as an enabling legislation that says, hey, locals, if you want to do something, go ahead and do it. And the standard for what those locals, like we did in the 80s, what the locals do is whether or not what they pass is rationally based on the goals that they're trying to accomplish at the state level and at the local level. And so this was made part of our local ordinance. I don't know what the exact date is. We could figure it out, but way back there in the 80s. And I don't think it's ever come up, and nobody's ever thought about it, is my guess. Many people didn't even know it existed. And as it sits, it is an enforceable local ordinance based on state statute that, in essence, says, go past what you think is rationally based on the goals we have. And your concern, which I understand, trust me, isn't that a taking, right? I mean, we all know what a taking is. You got to pay for a taking if you're the government. I think that's very much up in the air. And it becomes, in my view, it becomes a policy decision whether that's something that we as a county want to have in our ordinance.
My concern, is there any case law, or is there?
There is not.
Any? Yeah,
There is not.
Yeah, because my thought is, we do that down the road to, somebody has a big project, we're going to end up trying to defend that in court, and I'm not interested in doing that, or spending money to do that. Anyway, I'd just like to think through that.
No, and there's no case law on it, and so.
If there's no authority other than we dreamed it up.
Yeah, it is presumptively enforceable and correct as we sit here until it's challenged. And
Right.
Is it going to be challenged? Again, that's one of the many things that you folks consider when you decide whether or not you want to pass something.
Okay.
I get a little confused on the 5-year piece that we're talking about and eminent domain. Eminent domain is the taking of, right, and paying for. This is currently the one that's in the ordinance for 5 years says we can lock the land down, I'm paraphrasing, of course, for 5 years to discuss maybe wanting it? Is that?
Well, first, if a landowner wants to subdivide their property, that's the starting point. It doesn't happen to anybody other than someone coming forward saying, I want to subdivide my property. And there are plenty of things that property owners have to do when they subdivide their property, many of which maybe the property owner doesn't want to do. So that's not novel or new information, that people have to do things that they don't want to do when they subdivide. I think his concern and the question you just raised is whether or not it is a taking, and that's back to eminent domain. I think you could make an analogy that this is an option, and options are in the private world paid for, and so there's an argument there. How good is the argument? I don't know. I've not dug into it, but I think the better question is not whether it's subject to attack, because anything's subject to attack, is whether we as a county want that as a policy. It's more of a policy decision first, and if we decide, yeah, we need to make sure that we have parks that are planned and set aside, and that the local government that's going to do their parks has that option to say, hold on, we're going to spend 5 years deciding whether we want to put a park in. If that's good policy, then you pass it. And if it's not good policy, then you change it. So
I'll do some more research, but in my cursory research, I found some old language that gave them the authority to do that.
Who's they?
The state statute gave municipalities authority to reserve land even so far outside of their jurisdiction.
Okay, and
Back in the 80s, and that's since been repealed. So I think when they wrote it, it was more than just a dream. It was, they had statutory authority to do that, and it was based on that. And I think
if you've
over
got
time,
something, I'd love to see that, because I looked into that and I did not find that. So
Try
I'd be
find
happy
it.
to look
Yeah,
at that.
we'll send it to you.
If you've done my research for me, then I won't bill for it.
I will.
You will.
I can't. Anyway, so I know we talked about Jackson.
Yeah, I get a little, and voiced this at the public hearing whenever this came out, and I think many of us were shocked about the 5-year window. I get a little concerned about 5 years and halting a developer, and I don't think that anybody here would want to halt somebody for 5 years, but if they don't like the project and it's their way to just say, well, let's see if we can get it to go away, and we'll just put this little stamp on it for 5 years, and then maybe they don't do it in 5 years. I do think that we need a window of time for whatever body or jurisdiction it's under for a discussion with that developer. I think that would be very good. I think 5 years is too long, because if it comes up and says, if you can't figure something out in 6 months, you're probably not going to figure it out. And I just use 6 months as an example. I don't know what the appropriate amount of time is to allow conversations to be had between it coming for a breakup of the land. Let's say the city finds out about it. The city says, hey, I'd like to have discussions with the developer, maybe buy the land before they do that development. What's the appropriate amount of time? And I don't know that, but I think 5 years is too long.
Agree.
And so I guess I'll ask, and I don't know how to answer that question.
I guess what I'm saying is maybe we should put that on the agenda and try to
hash it out.
Explore that a little bit more and see if we can find some legal justification. I just don't want the county or the APC to get in defending something that really is non-defendable, because even though you can make that, the state constitution and other laws and rules will overrule that, and I'd rather not us make case law, let somebody else do it. So if there was case law, then we'd have some direction, but by not having any, it kind of says something that nobody else has done it. Because I think you're going to upset some people if you say you can't subdivide your property for 5 years. Ooh, somebody's going to challenge that.
And the only other comment I would have is part of the process of refreshing, overseeing any ordinance. I know City of West Lafayette's done it. I'm sure Lafayette's done it recently. Is making sure that everything you've got's lawful, and that's sort of the first cut that is done by an organization that a consultant, I guess is the term, right, who looks at these, and that's the first thing they do is, wait a minute, you can't do that anymore. And so that will be covered, and there may be a couple things stuck in there somewhere that aren't enforceable, and I believe that we still have the plan to go forward, or is that still up in the air whether there's going to be a comprehensive look at it by an outside consultant?
Plan to go forward, but at what time, we don't know.
Okay, any other comments on that? Any public input on that? It's not really on the agenda, but we'll hash it out.
Didn't realize we were. Once again, Steve Schrecking asked, do you need my address again? Does the statute clearly state who has the authority? Is it the park board or an elected officials has the authority to do this park easement?
I don't remember. But it doesn't say anything in the state statute.
Does it? No, it's not in the statute.
The state statute has nothing
about
this specifically.
Okay, so if West Lafayette Park Board wants to encumber property outside the city limits, that's a question mark whether or not that legally can be done?
They cannot, I think is what we decided.
Well, they can have it part of their plan, but it's not enforceable.
Yeah.
It can only be enforced by the jurisdiction that actually has the power, which means if they did it, then it's sort of a, hey, guys, we'd love it if you do this and don't have to.
But it would not.
But if the county adopted it later, then it becomes the county's to enforce.
And that would be adopted by the commissioners, county
Correct.
commissioners? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but I agree, I think this needs to be, why have a policy if it might end up being in a lawsuit? So.
Larry, did you have a thought there? Nope. Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, I will take that final motion.
Move we adjourn.
Thank you.
You want it?
Yeah, I wasn't picking up on what you were talking about. Oh, yeah, okay.
My memory is slow.
No, no.
I just lead somebody down the wrong path, and I thought a lot of times it sounds like it's the county that they go spend all the time. It's like, you can spend the time. Oh, no. We are.
A couple of us in a room to say, hey, we're all on the same page.
Architectural standards.
That's what I mean.
conference is no longer being recorded.